What if the moment you stop reacting is the moment she starts questioning everything? What if your silence isn't emptiness, but the most powerful message you ever sent? And what if choosing stillness over chaos transforms you into the man she can't forget? Let's dive deep into why ignoring her, not out of anger but from strength, becomes the shift that reclaims your power and reshapes the entire story. Have you ever noticed how the moment you stop chasing, she starts showing up again? Not because you said something, but because you stopped saying anything at all. This isn't a coincidence, it's psychology. The human mind is drawn to uncertainty. And when your energy is no longer predictable, when you're no longer checking in, replying fast, or giving her that steady dose of attention, she feels the shift, that silence. It gets louder in her head than any words you could have said. In this video, we're breaking down why ignoring her, when done from a place of emotional strength, flips the dynamic, triggers desire, and reminds her of exactly what she lost. Let's dive in. Number 1. Emotional silence echoes loudly. You don't blow up her phone. You don't double text. You don't ask, did I do something wrong? You just stop reacting. And that emotional silence, it speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. She was used to a version of you that was always there, ready to respond, to reassure, to repair. But now you're silent. Not out of spite, not to punish, but because you've re-entered. Your energy no longer moves at the pull of her moods. That kind of silence, the kind that radiates peace, not pettiness, is what unsettles her most. It says, I'm not chasing chaos. I'm protecting my calm. That's Stoicism in motion. Self-mastery over emotional dependency. There's a quiet strength in that kind of detachment. Not the cold defensive kind, but the kind that comes from deep clarity. When you stop trying to explain your worth, justify your emotions, or make her see your side, you're no longer operating from lack. You're moving from abundance because you've realized that the most powerful man in the room is the one who doesn't need to say much to be understood. Picture this. Before, all it took was a mood swing, a cryptic message, or a bit of distance, and you'd rush in to fix things. You'd overthink, over-apologize, overcompensate. But something shifted. You began responding to life, not reacting to it. You didn't block her. You didn't unfollow her. You simply stopped offering unlimited access to your emotional presence. And that subtle withdrawal, it changes the dynamic. Now she's the one noticing the silence, not because it's aggressive, but because it's grounded, clean, final. And here's the irony. When you don't respond emotionally, it doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've chosen to protect your peace over feeding confusion. It means you value your self-respect more than temporary connection. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That quote isn't just philosophy, it's a strategy. A man who embodies that truth doesn't chase closure. He creates it internally. She might not say anything, but trust this. She notices that emotional silence. It forces her to sit with the consequences of her own actions. No more reassurance, no more predictable responses, just the space you left behind. And the realization that your peace is no longer for sale. Because here's what most men never understand. Silence doesn't mean absence, it means presence of mind. It means you've evolved from reacting to reflecting, from pleasing to preserving. And in that stillness, she starts to feel something she hasn't felt in a while. Uncertainty, curiosity, regret. And that's when the shift truly begins. Number 2, attention isn't earned, It's withdrawn. Attraction isn't always about doing more. Sometimes it's about doing less, but with intention. You used to pour your energy into her, even when it wasn't returned. You gave your time, your focus, your emotional presence, hoping it would build a deeper connection, but now you've withdrawn. Not to punish her, not to manipulate, but to protect your peace. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You don't have to turn this into something." And you didn't. You let it be. You didn't force meaning where there was none. You just stopped showing up where your value went unseen. There comes a moment when you realize that love, attention, presence, when given too freely, too often starts to lose its impact. It fades into the background. It becomes part of the noise. What was once a gift begins to feel expected. And when that happens, people stop appreciating it. That's the quiet shift. That's when you pull back. Not out of resentment, but out of self-awareness. Suddenly she notices the difference, not just in messages or calls, but in emotional space where she used to feel held, supported, validated. There's now silence. And that silence, it's not empty. It's full of meaning. Because a man grounded in Stoicism doesn't cling. He doesn't beg for clarity or chase for closeness. He simply observes. He recognizes when energy isn't being matched. And he adjusts, not with drama, but with discipline. You didn't cause a scene. You didn't demand to be seen. You just stepped out of the spotlight she stopped looking toward. And in doing so, you reminded her presence isn't owed. It's earned. Picture this. She starts drifting. Messages become short. Her effort drops. Before that would have triggered a spiral. Maybe a long message, a confrontation, or a desperate gesture to bring things back. But now you do nothing. Not because you don't care, but because you care more about your dignity than her delayed validation. That's not weakness. That's power. That's growth. And here's the twist. It's often in your absence that your presence is most deeply felt. When she no longer has the safety net of your emotional availability, she starts to question what she lost. Not because you played a role, but because you stopped auditioning. You no longer seek to be chosen. You choose yourself. That withdrawal, that quiet detachment isn't about proving a point, it's about embodying one. That your energy is rare, that your presence is a privilege, and that the real reward is you. Take a moment to reflect on that. How often have you tried harder just to be seen only to feel invisible in the end? The truth is, when you stop chasing and start choosing yourself, the entire dynamic shifts. You're no longer trying to convince someone of your worth, you're simply living it. That's when they feel the difference. Not because you said anything, but because your silence says everything. So ask yourself, are you still auditioning? Or have you already stepped into the role of the man who knows his value? If this message hit home, let me know in the comments or just type, "My presence is a privilege." I read every word. Let's dive into the next exciting part of the video. Number 3, scarcity triggers value. What's always available is rarely appreciated. That's just human nature. When something or someone is always within reach, we stop feeling the need to reach for it. But when you step back, when your presence becomes scarce, measured, intentional, everything changes. She starts to feel it. Not because you're punishing her, not because you're playing games, but because you're finally choosing to honor your worth. Your energy is no longer up for grabs. And a man rooted in Stoicism understands this deeply. You don't toss your peace, your time, or your attention to anyone who treats it casually. You don't throw gold at people who treat it like gravel. This isn't about withholding love. It's about not bankrupting yourself emotionally. A Stoic doesn't retreat out of bitterness. He retreats out of balance. He understands the cost of giving too much to someone who gives too little in return. Like Epictetus said, know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. If you see yourself as someone of high value, you move like it. You protect your energy like it's sacred because it is. Let me paint a picture for you. She was used to having easy access to you. She could text late at night and know you'd answer. She could pull away knowing you'd lean in. She could test the waters and you'd always swim back. But now you're no longer swimming in her tide. You're building your own island. You're showing up for yourself. You've shifted your attention inward toward your goals, your growth, your peace. And the space you left behind, that space echoes. It lingers. It reminds her of what she once had, but didn't treasure. See, the scarcity of your presence doesn't make you mean. It makes you meaningful. Because anyone can be accessible, but to be remembered, to be respected, that requires restraint. The kind of restraint that says, my time isn't for everyone. My attention isn't a default setting. It's earned. And here's the beautiful part. You're not closing the door on her. You're just no longer holding it open while she decides whether to walk through it. So remember this. Your energy is your currency. Spend it wisely. And once you stop giving it away to people who only notice it when it's gone, something incredible happens. Those who truly value you will step forward, not because you begged, not because you convinced them, but because your silence, your absence, your stillness reminded them of what they lost. Number 4, predictability kills passion. You used to reply instantly, always said yes, always showed up. She could read you like a book. Every move, every word, every feeling. And let's be real. What we can predict, we stop craving. There's no tension in certainty, no spark in routine. But now you've shifted. You're harder to reach. Your energy doesn't orbit around her anymore. She doesn't know what you're doing, who you're with, what you're thinking. And that not knowing it pulls her in because mystery reawakens the mind. Uncertainty, when rooted in confidence, not chaos, is magnetic. And a Stoic man doesn't react to every impulse. He lets the tension build because he understands that desire grows in space, not suffocation. You see, passion isn't about constant closeness. It's about contrast, a rhythm between presence and absence, between what's known and what's unknown. When you used to reply within seconds, always be available, always say the right thing, it may have felt like connection. But over time, it diluted your impact. Because when everything is always given, there's nothing left to earn. No mystery, no edge. And without that edge, attraction dulls. But now that you've pulled back, not to punish, but to refocus, something shifted. She notices the pause. She rereads your last message. She wonders why you didn't respond this time. Her mind starts working overtime to fill in the blanks you used to fill for her. That subtle unpredictability. It doesn't just get her attention, it reactivates her desire. And that's where Stoicism plays its part. Restraint isn't about withholding. It's about not being enslaved by urgency. Marcus Aurelius said, "How much more harmful are the consequences of anger than the circumstances that aroused it?" It's a reminder. Don't be pulled by impulse. Don't feel pressured to act just because emotion knocks. When you choose stillness, when you let silence hold space instead of noise, you give her something rare in today's world: mystery. Think about it. What makes a great movie unforgettable? Not the predictable scenes, but the suspense, the uncertainty, the tension, the parts that make you lean in trying to figure out what happens next. When you stop being the man who's always available, always predictable, you become that story, that chapter she wants to reread, not skim through. You're no longer the highlight of her day because you showed up. You become the highlight because you didn't. And now she wonders why. That's the power of mystery. Not cold, not manipulative, just composed, disciplined, grounded. You're not avoiding her. You're elevating you. And in that elevation, in that calm unpredictability, you reignite what routine had dulled, her desire to figure you out again. And that's where the spark lives, not in what's always there, but in what's missed. Number 5, curiosity becomes her addiction. She's scrolling, rereading your last message, wondering why the energy shifted. The silence she once claimed to need. Now it wraps around her like a question she can't answer. See, you didn't vanish to play games. You detached to restore your peace. But ironically, that peace has become magnetic. It's what she feels most now. Like a true Stoic, you let your absence carry more weight than your words ever could. At first, she welcomed the space. It felt freeing. No constant notifications, no emotional weight to carry. But slowly, as your presence fades from her daily rhythm, something subtle starts to shift. Your good morning texts gone. Your check-ins during her stressful days, silent. That consistent emotional support now missing. And it's that very stillness that begins to echo in her mind. Not because you made a scene, but because the comfort she once overlooked has disappeared. And now the silence she once found convenient feels personal. This is the part most men don't understand. When you stop showing up, not with resentment, not with passive aggression, but with calm detachment, you transform from a man she figured out into a mystery she can't stop trying to solve. You become the unfinished sentence, the story she didn't get to close, and the mind it obsesses over what's incomplete. That's where curiosity grows, and curiosity often leads to desire. Now she's checking your online status, watching your stories for clues, rereading your old messages, trying to feel that old familiarity again. But it's different now. The man she used to rely on emotionally is no longer waiting in her inbox. He's living outside the echo of her silence. That unknown, that distance, it unsettles her in ways she didn't expect. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And that's exactly what you chose. You freed yourself from the need to be noticed, to be wanted, to be chosen. You stopped seeking her recognition, and in doing so, you became centered, still strong. You didn't ghost her. You outgrew her, and that truth, it lingers. Not because you broadcasted your growth, but because you let your stillness do the speaking. She feels the change, not through confrontation, but through contrast. The absence of the man who used to overgive, the presence of a man who no longer needs to. And that contrast is powerful. It's what makes her pause, what makes her wonder, what makes her crave what she once dismissed. You didn't stop caring. You just started caring for yourself more. And in that quiet evolution, you became unforgettable. Not because you chased, but because you became what can't be easily reached anymore. Number 6, you control the frame. She used to set the tone. She'd pull back. You'd lean in. She'd test. You'd over-explain. She'd go cold. And you'd heat up trying to close the gap. You were reactive, emotionally entangled in a dynamic where she held the remote to your peace of mind. But not anymore. Now you're grounded, calm, unshakable. You don't chase energy that's uncertain. You don't dance to a rhythm that keeps changing. And because of that stillness, that self-command, You now own the frame. In Stoicism, the frame isn't external. It's not about control over others. It's about control over yourself. You stopped seeking reassurance. You stopped molding your energy around hers. You're no longer shaped by her approval, her attention, or her withdrawal. That kind of inner shift, that's magnetic, because now you move with intention, not reaction. You're no longer available on emotional demand. You've stepped out of the tug-of-war, and instead of pulling, you observe. The moment you stopped letting her behavior dictate your emotions, everything changed. Before, your mood lived on a roller coaster. If she texted sweetly, you were up. If she got distant, you were down. She was the thermostat to your emotional climate. But now you've become the thermostat yourself. You don't just respond to temperature shifts, you set the temperature. That's what true sovereignty looks like. This is what Stoicism trains for, not cold indifference, but disciplined presence. Like Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. Mastery doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't get owned by what you feel. She can test, she can pull away, she can throw uncertainty your way, but you remain composed. You're not rattled. You don't chase clarity. You are clarity. And when she feels that shift, it disorients her. She used to know exactly which buttons to press. Now those buttons don't work. That tension, emotional unpredictability rooted in calm is what flips the script. You've stopped being the man who tries harder and become the man who decides whether it's even worth trying. That's when she starts wondering, rethinking, chasing. Because what she thought she had control over now feels just out of reach. The truth is, the one who holds the frame doesn't need to raise his voice. He doesn't need to prove anything. His calm is the message. His restraint is the power. And when you move like that, you no longer play the emotional games. You're not moved. You move. Because the man who owns the frame never has to pull. He simply leads. Now, I invite you to reflect. Have you been responding to her cues or setting your own tone? Share your thoughts in the comments. Or if you're walking in that self-led clarity now, simply type, "I own the frame." Let's see what fascinating insights are waiting for us. Number 7. Your absence feels different now. She thought this was just another phase that, like before, you'd pull away for a bit only to return the moment she left the door cracked open. But this time it's different. You're not playing hard to get. You're not secretly waiting for a sign. You've outgrown the need to be needed. You've stopped orbiting her and started revolving around something far more important, your purpose. And that absence she once brushed off, now it hits different because it's real, permanent. Not as punishment, but as peace. As Stoicism teaches, it's not about holding grudges. It's about growing beyond what no longer aligns with your path. There's a kind of silence that feels temporary, like you're just cooling off. But then there's the other kind, the kind that hums with quiet finality. The kind that says, "This is no longer where I live." You used to linger emotionally even after the connection frayed. Some part of you stayed behind, hoping, waiting, keeping the door ajar. But now that door isn't slammed shut. It just doesn't belong to your house anymore. Her name no longer triggers your heartbeat. Her updates don't pull you into that emotional loop because you're not there anymore. You're building something far more enduring yourself. Stoic philosophy sharpens that realization. You've stopped focusing on what you can't control. Her mood, her distance, her inconsistencies. Instead, you've turned inward, reclaimed your energy, reclaimed your mind. Like Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Her absence used to feel like rejection. Now it feels like redirection. You no longer see it as loss. You see it as liberation. And that's the difference. That's why your silence unnerves her now, because it's not filled with questions or longing. It's filled with growth, with calm, with the steady rhythm of a man who's no longer emotionally dependent on the past to feel whole. She expected the old pattern. You backing off, then circling back, a text, a like, a subtle attempt at reconnection. But this time there's no attempt, no hint, no breadcrumb. You didn't ghost her. You grew past her. And eventually she'll notice not just the quiet, but the man you've become in it. The stillness won't feel like distance. It'll feel like a door closing behind you. Not out of anger, not out of ego, but out of evolution. Because when you stop trying to be understood and start focusing on being undistracted, that's when your absence turns from silence into strength. And that lesson, she'll feel it long after the noise fades. Number 8. Desire thrives in uncertainty. She used to feel sure of you. She could count on your messages, your presence, your emotional availability. And while that certainty may have once brought her comfort, over time it made you predictable. Predictability, when unchecked, dulls attraction. But now the rhythm has changed. Your silence lingers, your absence speaks, and that uncertainty, the not knowing where she stands with you, creates space for something powerful. Desire. Because the mind craves answers, but it obsesses over questions it can't solve. You've become less obvious, less accessible, but more magnetic. Not because you're trying to be, but because you've become centered. The more grounded you are in your own life, the more unpredictable you become in hers. Not out of chaos, not from games, but because emotional sovereignty can't be mapped. A Stoic doesn't chase love. He builds himself, and in doing so becomes the kind of man who draws attention without needing to demand it. There's something deeply compelling about not knowing exactly where someone stands. When she had your attention on demand, it lost its edge. You were consistent, always there, always reaching out, and she stopped wondering. But now that your energy has shifted, now that your presence isn't a guarantee, her curiosity is reawakened. She begins to feel your absence like a question, left unanswered. Her imagination fills the gaps, and that's where desire grows. You're not playing hard to get. You're just no longer easy to access. You've stepped into your own orbit. You're building, improving, focusing. Not to prove anything to her, but because that's who you're becoming. You don't need to be seen to feel valuable. You don't need to be validated to feel grounded. You've detached not in bitterness, but in discipline. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." You've let go of craving, her attention, her responses, her approval. And that choice made you rich not in possessions, but in presence, solid, calm, whole. And the irony, that wholeness, your quiet indifference now stirs something in her, because she can't predict your next move. She can't decode your silence. She can't be sure of what you're feeling. And that mystery is fuel. When she doesn't know what page of your story she's on anymore, she starts rereading the parts she once skimmed over. She starts wondering if she's still part of the plot. And that wondering brings with it a desire to be included again. Not out of comfort, but out of curiosity. Because true attraction isn't loud. It doesn't beg or chase, it's composed, confident, rare. And a man who walks forward without looking back, who doesn't need to be remembered to feel worthy, is the very man she can't forget. Number 9. She misses the man who needed nothing. At the end of the day, she misses the version of you who used to need her. The one who texted first, who always checked in, who tried to read between the lines just to make sure everything was okay. Back then, she held the emotional leverage. She could shift the dynamic with a word, a glance, a delay, in response. But now you've outgrown that version of yourself. You've become whole, grounded, not bitter, not boastful, just focused. And that shift in energy, that quiet evolution, that's exactly what draws her in. Because you're no longer seeking her approval, you're radiating your own. She can't control you anymore. You're not her source of validation, her emotional cushion, or her fallback attention. You've become something much more powerful, a man who respects himself enough to stop performing. You've chosen peace over people-pleasing, purpose over pursuit, and that kind of man, the one who doesn't need to be needed, becomes unforgettable. It's ironic, isn't it? When you craved her, she had power. She could test your patience, pull back her energy, and watch you lean in. But the day you stopped chasing, when you stopped trying to convince her of your worth, was the day the entire story changed. You didn't declare your growth. You didn't post about it. You just became day by day, quietly, confidently, with no need for her to notice. And that absence of need, it says more than any long message ever could. It's in your silence, in your consistency, in the way you now move, deliberate, disciplined, and detached from anything that once threw you off center. You no longer ask, will she come back? Instead, you ask, does this path align with the man I'm becoming? That's where the gravity comes from, the stillness, the certainty. She can feel it even if she can't explain it, because for the first time, you're not orbiting her emotions. You're building your own universe. And in that universe, you're not waiting, you're expanding. A Stoic doesn't detach to punish. He detaches to protect what's sacred. His energy, his vision, his soul. Marcus Aurelius said, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." That's your new home now. A space untouched by external noise. A space where validation comes from discipline, not desire. And a man who no longer needs to be chosen becomes the one who can't be replaced. She might never say it aloud, but she feels it. She replays old moments, rethinks old assumptions. Because now you're not just a memory, you're a mirror, a reflection of everything she thought she'd always have access to, but didn't value until it was gone. And nothing lingers longer in the heart than the man who didn't walk away in anger, but walked away in clarity, in grace, in strength. So, what did we just uncover? Attraction isn't born in noise. It's born in stillness. The moment you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop needing, something shifts. Not just in her, but in you. You become the man who no longer runs after approval, but walks with self-respect. And that version of you, he doesn't chase connection. He becomes the connection that others chase. If there's one truth to carry forward from this video, it's this. Your silence, when rooted in self-worth, not pride, is louder than anything you could have said. It echoes in the spaces she once filled with certainty. It lingers in her mind, not because you're missing, but because you've become something rare. A man who no longer needs to be needed. Remember, Stoicism isn't coldness, it's calm. It's not about withholding love. It's about not abandoning yourself to give it. You don't pull back to create absence, you do it to reclaim presence, your own. So here's your final takeaway. You are not a reaction, you are a decision. And when your energy becomes sacred, your absence becomes powerful. Now, I want to hear from you. What part of this video hit the hardest? Was it the silence, the shift in energy, or maybe the realization That she comes back when you stop needing her to? Drop your thoughts in the comments or just write, "I choose peace over performance." I'll know you watched all the way through. And if this video gave you clarity, strength, or just a new lens to look through, make sure to hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to check out the recommended videos on screen right now. Each one is a step deeper into becoming the grounded, focused, emotionally sovereign man you're meant to be. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, protect your peace, walk with clarity, and let your silence speak volumes.